Senator from Vermont.
I apologize to my friend from North, but okay.
South Carolina.
Mr. President, I want to talk about an issue that millions and millions of people all over this country are increasingly concerned about, and that is that last week the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, released a proposal in response to a recent federal court decision that struck down the Commission's 2010 Open Internet Order. The proposal would, for the very first time, allow Internet service providers to be able to pay for priority treatment. What this means, in point of fact, is the end of net neutrality and the end of the Internet as we know it. Mr. President, what net neutrality means is that everyone in our country, and in fact the world, has the same access to the same information. Whether you are a mom and pop store in Hardwick, Vermont, or whether you are Walmart, the largest private corporation in America, you should have the same access to your customers. Net neutrality also means that a blogger, somebody who just blogs out his or her point of view in a small town in America, should have the same access to his or her readers as the New York Times or the Washington Post. If the FCC allows huge corporations to negotiate, quote-unquote, fast-lane deals, then the Internet will eventually be sold to the highest bidder. Companies with the money will have the access, and small businesses will be treated as second or third-class citizens. This is grotesquely unfair, and this will be a disaster for our economy and for small businesses all across our country. I want to take this opportunity to thank Commissioners Clyburn and Rosenworcel for their strong support of net neutrality. They are doing exactly what the American people want from the Commission. During last week's hearing, Commissioner Rosenworcel stated, and I quote, "We cannot have a two-tiered Internet with fast lanes that speed the traffic of the privileged and leave the rest of us lagging behind," end of quote. Commissioner Clyburn noted, quote, "The free and open exchanges of ideas is critical to a democratic society," end of quote, and she is, of course, absolutely right. Now, I have to say, Mr. President, I don't mean to be particularly partisan on this issue, but the facts are the facts, that in contrast, the Republican commissioners, Ajit Pai and Michael O'Reilly, would like to completely deregulate the Internet. Commissioner O'Reilly said in response to the proposal, and I quote, "As I've said before, the premise for imposing net neutrality rules is fundamentally flawed and rests on a faulty foundation of make-believe statutory authority. I have serious concerns that this ill-advised item will create damaging uncertainty and head the Commission down a slippery slope of regulation," end of quote. That is Republican Commissioner O'Reilly. Now, what does all of this mean in English? What it means is that when you talk about deregulating the Internet, you're talking about allowing money, big money, to talk, and allowing the big money interest once again to get their way in Washington. And that is very, very wrong. We cannot allow our democracy once again to be sold to the highest bidder. I think, Mr. President, all of us agree that the Internet has been an enormous success in fostering innovation and enabling free and open speech across the country and throughout the world. You know, we kind of take it for granted. But, Mr. President, when you and I were growing up, there was no Internet. And I think we can all acknowledge now what a huge advance it has been for business and for general communication. Unfortunately, these Republican commissioners on the FCC want to fix a problem that does not exist. What they want is to change the fundamental architecture of the Internet, to remove the neutrality that has been in place for decades, since the inception of the Internet, and to allow big corporations to control content online. Mr. President, let me tell you that the American people in Vermont and across this country care very deeply about this issue. A little while ago, in advance of the FCC's vote on my Internet, I asked people in Vermont and throughout the country to share their views with me, to write to me and tell me what they thought about the attempt to do away with net neutrality. And I was blown away by the response that we got. Mr. President, more than 19,000 people have submitted comments to my office so far, and what they are saying in statement after statement after statement is that the FCC has got to defend net neutrality. And I think these 19,000 people represent the vast majority of the people in this country who understand how important net neutrality is. And I just want to take this opportunity and take a very few moments to share some of the comments that I received through my website. Anthony Drake of Moreno Valley, California, said, quote, "Net neutrality is vital for a free and open Internet and the economic advantages that it has brought our nation and the world. Please work to reclassify ISPs as common carriers under Title II of the Communications Act," end of quote. Stamford, Vermont resident Roy Gibson concurred, telling the FCC that Internet providers, quote, "should be treated like utilities," end of quote, and I agree with Roy Gibson. Reg Jones of Bennington, Vermont, said President Obama must uphold his campaign promise to enforce net neutrality. Quote, from Reg Jones, quote, "Net neutrality should be mandated as President Obama promised. Any attempt to allow differential speeds and access to the Internet should be squashed, and those who propose it should be replaced by people who represent all of the citizens of this country. Internet access should be for the good of all, not for the select few who already have too much power and more money than they need," end of quote. William LaFrana of Versailles, Kentucky, said, and I quote, "Everyone should have equal access to the Internet. The Internet was developed with taxpayer funding and should not be held hostage to corporate piracy," end of quote. Patricia Moriarty from Harwich Point, Massachusetts, wrote, and I quote, "The Internet is the only place where we truly have freedom of speech and the ability to freely exchange new ideas around the world. Leave the Internet open," end of quote, Patricia Moriarty writes. Mr. President, President Obama himself has long been on record supporting net neutrality. In 2007, then presidential candidate Obama said, and I quote, "What you've been seeing is some lobbying that says that the servers and the various portals through which you're getting information over the Internet should be able to be gatekeepers and to charge differential rates to different websites. So you can get much better quality from the Fox News site and you're getting rotten service from the mom-and-pop sites." And that, I think, destroys one of the best things about the Internet, which is that there is this incredible equality there, end of quote. That's Barack Obama when he was campaigning for president. Barack Obama was right when he said that, and I would very strongly urge the president to stand up for what he said when he was campaigning for president and defend net neutrality. Now, I understand that the FCC is an independent body, but the American people have spoken with a clear and unified voice that they want to maintain net neutrality. What is so frustrating for the American people is to elect a candidate, in this case the President Obama, who campaigned on an issue, and then now see the FCC, many members of whom he appointed, move it in a different direction. It is simply not enough for the President to sit on the sidelines on this issue. We need him to speak out for net neutrality, as he did when he campaigned for President. So, Mr. President, let me conclude by simply saying that the Commission will soon consider whether or not to reclassify the Internet as a so-called common carrier. Under this distinction, the Internet would be treated like other utilities. Being classified as a common carrier will mean that Internet service providers must provide the same service to everyone without discrimination. This is the only path forward to maintain an open forum free of discrimination. Over the next few months, the public will have an opportunity to weigh in on this proposal by the FCC. Each of us, and I hope every member of Congress, should be concerned about this issue. I encourage you to be vocal. If people want to write to my office, sanders.senate.gov, we already have 19,000 people commenting. We welcome even more. But I would hope that the American people rally around this issue of net neutrality and we defeat any proposal to do away with that. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Mr. President.